I'm Hilary Hahn, and I am here with...
Nico Muhly. Hi.
Hi! I was wondering what your schedule is like these days. You must be on the road a lot for your own concerts.
I am on the road. I'm going, in a week, I go to London and Amsterdam, back and forth like 6 times in a month, because I have something going on in each place, so I'm just shuttling back and forth.
Are you playing, or it's just helping with rehearsals and the preparation?
A combination. I'm playing a couple shows with a bunch of friends. Mm-hmm. I'm playing a ballet score, and then another ballet score is being played in Holland by other people, and I'm just there to sort of give moral support to the choreographer.
How involved do you like to be in the interpretation of your music?
Actually not much, in a weird way, because I feel like if I've done my job putting it on the page, that anything from there is sort of fair game. So unless I've made a mistake, or unless there's something that's really unclear, I feel like people can do what they want.
Okay, cool. And
I think.
Well,
if I were hit by a bus, then they just have to do what they want.
Yeah, and I guess eventually you want your music to be able to speak for itself when people can't ask you things too.
Right. And if you end up with multiple kind of interpretations, that's a beautiful thing, rather than there being this one way that it has to be done. I think it's nice to sort of embrace that while you're still alive, because then you can have a real diversity of interpretations.
Absolutely. And when you're on the road, how do you write music? I know when I'm on the road, I can hardly balance everything, but I've figured out kind of a way. So how do you play and compose and
what I try to do is I set aside time, usually in the early morning, like before anyone else gets up. And the earlier the better, because especially if I'm in Europe, like no one in America is awake yet, so they can't call me. I'm sure it's like the minute New York wakes up, it's like everyone's like hello. So I have my little notebook, and I try to just be really, really focused about each morning putting in. It's sort of like practicing, just like putting. I don't necessarily have anything to do, just like be working on something. So it becomes like a habit. It usually works. The problem is that you really, really can't. If you're touring and doing these late shows, like then it's crazy, because then you're like you're out until 2:00 in the morning, and then you wake up at 7:45 on some bus somewhere in the middle of Belgium, and you're like desperately trying to sketch out like a clarinet fingering or something. That I don't like so much.
Do you keep the same kind of work schedule at home?
No, at home it's a little more relaxed, actually. At home I can afford to be more. What's the word? More. I can see friends. I can cancel things. I can be a little bit more chilled out, because I know that my desk is always here, and I can just run to it. And even if I can sneak in like 20 minutes, it's good. You know what I mean? Like even
Absolutely.
if I can just run and sit down and work for an hour secretly between things, then I'm okay.
Mm-hmm. What are you working on these days?
I am revising an opera. The piano vocal score is due on Monday, and it's Friday, and I'm pretty close to done. But right now I'm going through I'm doing like the really nitty gritty, like making sure that everything is like exactly like spelled correctly and the hyphenations are right or whatever. It's kind of a boring process, which I inevitably do wrong, and my copyist yells at me. But I'm just going through it really, really, and making sure that it's the right length. That's like my hugest anxiety in writing music, is that things are the right length.
How do you know when something is done? How do you know when it's the right length?
Usually it's sort of like, I'm trying to think. It's sort of like that magic of cooking pasta, where it's like you want it to just have that certain amount of resistance, and you learn. I think you just learn it eventually, and it takes. Or like cooking rice or whatever, how it takes like 7 years to learn how to do it right. I feel like I'm still in my apprenticeship of learning how to make things the right length. Mm-hmm. But it's there's a lot of music that's just like the length is just perfect, and it makes the whole thing better. You know what I mean? It's something like, for instance, like Sibelius' Seventh Symphony for me is like the perfect length. That thing could not be like a second long or something. It's like just right. There's and then there's some things like, for instance, like Bruckner, where you're like, I'm not sure that needed to be that. Like, it was great. No no one's complaining. But anyway, I don't know. It's a huge anxiety. It's kind of fun.
Yeah, there's really no formula, I would imagine. It depends on the musical language and the concepts and the development of them and
everything. Yeah, and then sometimes it comes down to tempi too, where it's like if you the way you mark something and the way that you want to hear it is totally different. Actually, this is something I don't know if you've played a lot of stuff with like pre-recorded elements.
No, I haven't.
I've learned that when I play, like I wrote a piece for myself that's pre-recorded, and it's 4 minutes long. I'm playing against a pre-recorded version of myself. Every time I play it live, my adrenaline is such that I think that someone has like slowed down the tape in the middle of the night.
Oh.
It sounds like so much slower. When you're on stage, you're like, why are we going so slow? So, length is relative. But, as the saying goes, it's what you do with it or whatever. So you have to sort of plan for all those things in advance.
Yeah. So, where are you finding your compositional inspiration these days? I know you work from all sorts of ideas and directions.
I've been reading a lot of stuff about the history of forbidden food, weirdly, and sort of taboo foods. So I'm not sure how this is going to translate, but I've been reading about sort of things that are really delicious, but also kind of but for instance, I was reading just this morning about a certain kind of bird that in France where you would eat it whole, you drown it.
Oh, I heard about that. Yeah.
Right, and you need to shroud your head when you eat it because you have to hide your acts from God or something. It's so fabulous. And I was just thinking about sort of there must be some sort of way to, I don't know, I've been thinking about those things. I've been thinking about forbidden food. I've been thinking about sort of food taboos. I don't know. I'm not sure how it's gonna play out, but that's been something that I've been into.
How do you make that leap from something that's not musical to the composition process?
I don't know. I mean, I think in a lot of cases I really don't know. That's sort of the mystery thing for me, and it is a leap, and in that sense, there's a missing underneath part that I never quite understand. But in general, if you write out kind of if you think about something long enough, I think the brain begins to translate it easily. I think. I mean, if you really give a lot of thought to, for instance, medieval travel narratives, or I mean, really anything. If you think about perfume making, or I'm just looking at my desk, the history of coffee, like all these things, eventually will just sort of seep down into the more primal, like musical language that I speak. I don't know. It's a kind of delicious mystery.
Yeah. How much do you consider composing to be inventing as opposed to incorporating things that either already exist or are kind of floating around in the ether?
That's going to be it. I think innovation is kind of like this overhyped thing, and I think that in a lot of cases, composing is a curatorial. For me, at least, in a lot of cases, it's a curatorial act where it's like you're culling things from all over the place. But it's also about, I guess it's sort of like curation in the presence of technique. I forgot what it is. Remember in like high school chemistry class, they taught you that thing where it's like an equal sign but weird, where it's like in the presence of.
I missed that class. I kind of skipped. Shit. I skipped all my science.
Right, you were doing.
But I'm sure everyone else knows what you're talking about. I was reading books.
I think composing in a lot of cases is, it's listening and curating in the presence of a technique and a process that helps you transform it. So it is transformation, but I'm not convinced that it's like, you're not inventing anything from completely random places. And I think you find that even with 20th century music, even the most sort of iconoclastic composers, there is a source. There's always a garden somewhere that they're taking their stuff from. And I think it just has to do with how much transformation you apply to it, how much heat, how much pressure, how much strange olive oil science.
Yeah. I imagine it's also an issue of time. Just how things change over time and how the current situation or context affects how people perceive things that have already been done to be new. So I imagine that's part of it too.
And also, I mean, I think the best thing to do is to not be worried about it too much, because it's, in a sense, if it works and if it's good, then where it came from, I think, is sort of a secondary or tertiary concern. I think, in a lot of music criticism, there's this obsession with oh, it's derivative, it comes from all the, as if by pointing out where it came from, you've exposed its faults, which to me is like a really uninteresting thinking about the world, because really it's like, if no one's pretending that composing is this like witch's brew, you know what I mean? Right? Like turn on the lights, I hide my head from God, and then go into my mystic space.
That's one way to keep people from interrupting you. Don't take any calls.
Interpretation comes from things you've heard, things you're thinking about in the presence of your technique, right? An interpretation is never going to be like outrageously original, that you invented some new way to play Paganini or something like.
Right, it's just how you put all the elements together, and then
exactly. It's sort of how you deal with. It's like how you deal. It all relates to me with cooking. It's like how you go to the market, where how you deal with seasonal things. If you know the relationship of fat to vegetables, and if you understand the right pasta shape goes with the right sauce or not, or whatever. It's all these little pieces of information. Sometimes it's grandma taught you it, and sometimes science taught you it, and sometimes it's the woman across the hall from Fuzhou taught you it. But it's it comes from everywhere.
I have a couple of quick questions about your career for the younger composers out there. And I was thinking, when you look back at the development of your career, especially at the very early stages, is there anything about it that surprises you in retrospect?
Wow, surprises. Yeah, actually,
Bless you.
I realized, so much of it comes back to, I'm surprised by how you can get away, or not even get away, but how much your friends who are musicians help. Like, if you have friends who are championing your music, it helps so much more than, in a weird way, than doing sort of.
Wait, I lost you there. I lost you there. Could you repeat that? When you have friends who are musicians, it helps you much more than